Okay, that's better. I usually stand up when I teach lessons, and yesterday I was tired and decided to sit down. So, and I forgot to adjust my camera. Hey, everybody! Nice to see you. And I've got a bunch of questions to read off and answer. But we'll start with Cardo since he popped in first. Hello, Eddie. He says, what do you think about practicing throughout the day in small sessions like 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off, etc.? I think I read somewhere that this was the system used by Maurice Andre. So let me tell you what I learned about Maurice Andre, and I always have to say when I talk about the stuff I learned in the 80s, I have to put a disclaimer because there's a lot of stuff I learned in the 80s that I found out later was not true, not accurate. And so a lot of times that doesn't affect the effectiveness, does not affect the effectiveness of I call it trumpet lore, right? Trumpet lore is stuff that we're taught that isn't true, but it works anyway. Um, I hope that makes sense. So there's a lot of trumpet lore that isn't true, but we continue to teach that stuff because the benefit of doing that stuff is true, regardless of whether or not the source was correct or whatever. So let me tell you what I learned about Maurice Andre. And by the way, it's in my One Range book. Um, this is one of the recommendations I put in the One Range book. I don't know if I acknowledge Maurice Andre in the book. I don't think I do because, like I said, I don't know what's true and what's not true. So what I was told is that he practiced an hour first thing in the morning and then rested for an hour. Then he practiced a half hour, rested for a half hour, and then he practiced 15 minutes for the rest of the day. Um, so like you said, where you said 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off, um, what I was told that he would do 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. Now, if I didn't like that, it wouldn't be in my book. So, yes, I do actually think that's a great way to do it. In fact, when we talk about the uh, in my in my 3 levels of rest video, we talk about the second level being if you practice, I call it the minute level. If you practice 10 minutes, you should rest 10 minutes. That's where that comes from, is that first story I was told about Maurice Andre. And I continue to do that today. Also, this was a huge thing in the 90s. You know, the beginning of my internet time was in the 90s. So um, I started when the internet started. I started online. I've had an online presence since there wasn't an online to be present on. And one of the big things that was going around in the 90s was this whole 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, back and forth like that. And yes, these guys practice all day like that. So, yes, that's a good thing. Hello, Janelle, and hello, Anthony. Nice to see you guys. All right. Janelle says hello from Minnesota. All right. Now, let me read some questions. I've got a stack of them actually. This time I decided to print them out. All right. So the first question I have here is from Aaron. Says, "Hi Eddie. First of all, I just want to say how much I've been enjoying your YouTube videos. I'm a comeback trumpet player, and they've all been very helpful in my development. Secondly, I was curious as to the make and model of the cornet you've had in a few videos and also holding in the photos on your website. I'm in the market for some new gear, and I really value your opinion. Thanks so much, and keep up the great work. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. So this is a pudgy. We've talked about it here before on the Q and A. So it says Mod 5 on the side. I keep forgetting what he's calling it now. Let me pull up the website. And it's not a cornet, it's actually a trumpet. Um Trumpet mouthpiece goes in there. And he's calling it just Mod, M-O-D. And that's by Pudgy. And I've posted these links on the Q&A before, but I don't mind doing that again. So let's post a link in here. There's the link. All right. Anthony asks, Andrew's wife was always telling him every 15 minutes to walk the dog, take out the garbage. Oh my. All right. Hello, Laurel. She says, oh, hello from WNC, Waynesville, North Carolina. Okay. I used to live in North Carolina when I was young. Hello. Um, I lived in North Carolina for my 6th grade. It was the first time I lived in one place for a whole year in my whole life. First time I ever lived anywhere for a whole year. That's crazy, right? All right, so let's go on to the next question. I've got a bunch of these. And you know what? I was gonna try to do all of them at the beginning. Um, I was gonna try to do all the pre-questions at the beginning, but then I thought, you know what? We're gonna have to stagger them because we've got people here and then these questions. So yeah. Cardo says, thanks a lot, Eddie. I definitely will ask my wife to buy me that one range book. All right. As a present for your birthday. Well, very good. That would be cool. All right. And Laurel says, love this area. Beautiful. Yes, that's some beautiful country there. All right. So now, next question. Oh, this is from Anthony. Anthony's here, but we'll answer his question anyway. Eddie, I wasn't able to ask you during Q&A, but once you mentioned to me that playing the trumpet backing tracks is not a good idea, are your play-alongs different? And so here's the thing, Anthony. It's different tools for different purposes. I don't doubt that I said that. I don't remember saying that, but I don't doubt it. But it would have been the context I would have said that is if you would have said, I'm working on ABC, and if you said I'm doing play along videos to do that, I would have said no, that's probably not a good idea. Like for example, if you're doing play along videos to work on your scales, that's probably not a good idea. If you're doing play along videos to work on lip slurs and flexibility, that's probably not a good idea. I hope that makes sense. I've never been against play alongs ever. It's using them for the right, for using the right play along for the right tool. As the proper tool for whatever it is that you're having trouble with. It's about why and when. Okay, I hope that answers that question. Next one is Anthony again. All right, Anthony says, Eddie, in your sight listening video, which chords exactly do you mean? I'm not gonna say that part. Um, which scores am I talking about? Anything that has what do you call it? The proper notes written. So what we want in my sight listening video, I was talking about score videos that have what you hear is what you see on the page or on the screen. Um, and you also mentioned what's his name's videos, and they are for the most part, and forget his name. One of the top YouTube trumpet players. Um, but he's got some play along videos, and those work fine for what I'm talking about, except for this one tiny exception, and it's not a major exception. It's just that if you're using it for the reason that I'm talking about, then it's a problem, right? Um, he adds some inflection, like he might add some grace notes. He might add a glissando going up, and that's not written on the part. And if what you're trying to do is match what it sounds like with what it looks like, that's going to confuse things a little bit. So any score video. Now, the term score video comes from the the um like what I have, right? Where you put the music up and then the score is on screen, where we usually talk about the score being all of the parts, but in some cultures, all of the individual parts are also referred to as scores. So, what we're looking for in this context is any video that has the written part on the screen so you can follow, and then you can also listen at the same time. At the end of the video, I said something to the extent of just be careful that what you're listening to is actually what's on the screen. If they don't match up, you're kind of wasting your time. And that's um what my slight concern is with that other guy's videos is that um if he's adding embellishments and the embellishments are not written on the screen, that kind of waters it down just a little bit. Just a little bit, okay? Laurel asks, what about smart music? And I like smart music. Smart music is very good for practicing your sight reading. Um, But for what we're talking about here, we don't actually try to play the music. So the reason he's asking about play along videos is a lot of the play along videos actually have the part written. And I mean, not have the part written. They all have the part written. What am I saying? The part written and the 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 part you're hearing is the same part as what you're seeing, and that's what we're talking about. Is just watching those and not trying to play them. I put my hand behind my back because when I'm doing this myself, I sit on my hands to make sure I don't finger the music. Okay, and I tell my students to do the same thing. Just Ford says, when you talk about the top of your range in the one range book, is that my highest comfortable note or is it the highest note I can play? It's your highest comfortable note. Okay. It's your highest comfortable note. And and I mean your highest comfortable note after after you start getting tired. So, not your highest comfortable note fresh, your highest comfortable note when you're tired. That's your real top of your range, but definitely not the highest note you can play. And there is a little bit of confusion with that because different students have different standards, and some students hold themselves to such a high standard that what they feel comfortable with after they're tired is a very, very low note. I'm not talking about those students. With those, I have to coax them into playing higher because they, they if they crack the note, if you know what I mean, if it's not 100% in tune, if it doesn't have their absolute best quality, they're saying they're not comfortable with that. Okay. And when I'm thinking comfort, I'm thinking about how much do I have to struggle to get the note. I'm not thinking about how perfect it is when I'm up there. And so, yes, there are some students that have such high standards in that regard that they, um, you know, their perceived highest comfortable note is actually lower than what it really is. Anthony says, I need sight singing to help me with my sight reading and band. You mentioned that if you're just one note short on the whole note, you're lost. That's absolutely right. So that's rhythm counting, what you're talking about there. If what your problem in sight reading is rhythmical and you cut notes too short or make notes too long, now you're off from the rest of the band. And that's when we would use these play alongs. I'm going to be talking about this stuff in the upcoming sight reading videos. Um, but yes, it's great to use the play alongs in that regard because the play alongs can't even hear you. So if you get off, you're way off. Whereas if you're playing duets, you could get off and the other person can just kind of follow you. So that's a little bit, you know, a little bit more lenient. Okay, I've got one from Jim Caulfield. Hey Eddie, how do I play above G without smashing the horn in my face? And we kind of covered that. Um, I believe I believe that no matter what your range is, the way we approach getting past that. And by the way, if you're having to smash your horn in the face, that's what we were talking about earlier about the highest comfortable note. If you have to smash your face to get to that note, that's not your highest comfortable note. Boy, I look awful. Sorry about that. I need a haircut. So now, how do you get to where you can do that without smashing your face? It's the same thing as what I've been teaching, right? And what we said here about um, the three levels of rest, that's part of it. If you're not doing the three levels of rest, always the very first thing when a student comes in and says, I'm struggling with something like this, struggling with rain, struggling with too much pressure, the very first thing I'll do is make sure that they are resting correctly, and that's those three levels of rest that we're talking about. That's the most important thing. And now let's talk about what when we say smashing the horn in my face, we're talking about using too much pressure. And I actually have a video about um I think I do. Now I'm pulling a blank. Let me look real quick. So I think I have a video about reducing pressure. I'm pretty much sure about this. Um, and it's usually not what most people say. Most of what I say is not what other people say. Yes, 3 steps to reduce mouthpiece pressure. I'll put the link here. Let me. It drags a little bit when I'm doing the live stream. All right, I've got a link. Let me copy it and paste it. So yes, the stuff I talk about that in that video will help, and also, just the whole one range approach will help with this. Oh, what we were talking about is what causes too much pressure. It's always fatigue. If you're not fatigued, you don't. I guess if you're trying to play higher than what you should be playing, that's something, right? But most of the time when we talk about using too much pressure, it's because you got tired too fast. So mouthpiece pressure is really, in my opinion, an endurance problem. It's a strength problem. If you don't have enough strength to do what you're trying to do, that's when you instinctively start using more pressure because the pressure swells the lip up and makes the note goes higher. Okay? So I would say, um, now, the stuff that we talk about in the one range book applies here. You do the resting, you do um the physical trumpet pyramid, and then I forgot what the other one is. There's three things that I talk about. And then and the 50% rule. So if you use the one range approach, it should help you fix that. All right. On to the next question. Okay, this one's from Jeff. I was checking out your books and curious what you recommend for beginners. I was learning how to play O Come Emmanuel and ran across your unadorned version on YouTube and immediately became a fan of your playing. Woohoo! Yes, thank you. I know you don't get paid for answering questions here, but I'd like to buy a couple of your books. Help if I can. I'll make an effort to join your Q and A as well. Thanks. Okay, so right now, the books that I have for beginner level, well, not beginner level, but yeah, you say beginners. Yes, okay. So the books I have for that level, um, a little limited right now. Um, we have the Chops Express book that would help. Okay, but it's just the first routine in Chops Express. It's that very first. There's 7 routines in the Chops Express, 7 different levels. The first level is easy enough for most beginners. Um, I also have the Trumpet Folk Fill in the Blank book. Okay. Let me see if I can grab that real quick. So, my students love this when we do it. This is what it looks like. That's Trumpet Folk Fill in the Blank. And it's only now starting to sell. And the reason for that, here's what the music looks like. So it is a little bit on the simple side. But here's the trick. It's so for each song, we have the song in several different keys. You have the key of C, then on this side we have G, I'm not G, D, B flat, and F. Okay, and what happens on the flip side is some of the notes are replaced with question marks. So when you're playing this and you get to a question mark, you have to sort of play by ear, or you not ear, or you can try to remember technically what what the um what the notes are, like thinking it's the third note, the fourth note, the fifth note. You can try to remember that way. Now this is a wonderful book. It's fun. It's frustrating fun because if you don't get it, it's like I can't even play a stupid nursery rhyme. Right? So it is a little bit frustrating. Um, Now, let me tell you this. I have other books that I'm working on now that I use with my students. Most of my beginner materials are unpublished, and I'm constantly developing, constant all this, um, and it's a system I've been working on for longer than all of my other books. I've been searching all these years for a method that would work for most students. See, the beginners tend to be more different than all of the other students. What do I mean by that? The- Maybe they've had piano, maybe they didn't have piano. Maybe have they had any music instruction at all? Or maybe they haven't had any music instruction. What is their facial structure like? How strong are their lips? We have more variety at the beginner level than any other level. And finding a method that works for all of those students is not easy. In fact, that's why I started writing my own materials in the first place, was because I could not find materials that worked appropriately for my students, my beginners, um, the way I wanted. So for now, the Chops Express has beginner stuff in it. There is the Trumpet Chops Tyro. That's not absolute beginner, but so I have two beginner levels, and if you want to look for materials that have those two levels, I have Trumpet Pioneer level and then the Trumpet Tyro level. Trumpet Pioneer is absolute beginner, and Trumpet Tyro is that second beginner level. So this book is actually in my Tyro level, not the Pioneer level. Like I said, the Pioneer stuff is the most difficult to. Oh, I just thought of another one. If you're into duets, I have another um another book, the Celebrations book. And in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I also have, let me go grab one of those. Okay, so I had forgotten all about these. I have two duet books. Oops. Two duet books. They look kind of similar, but the it's stylistically that they look similar. The first one is 20 Trumpet Pioneer Duets. And it starts off easy, easy, easy. So that's the easiest one in the book, all whole notes. And the hardest one in the book is here. So that's also some beginner stuff. Now the second version of that book, and eventually I'd like to have 7 of these. The second one has same thing, but just at a higher level. This will have more key signatures, more time signatures, and it includes also eighth notes and dotted notes and um, stuff like that. So basically, for now, we're limited to that. The only other thing I will say, the only other thing I'll say as far as for beginners is the major scale expansion studies help a whole bunch for getting your foot in the door with the different scales. In fact, I would say that you shouldn't do this book until you've done and it says that in the book, by the way, until you've done the um, expansion studies first, and then do the tonalization studies. And I actually have that on where it says a note to the teachers. I actually talk about that because this book would be unreal difficult. The trumpet folk and fill in the blank would be unreal difficult if you didn't have that foundation of the major keys. So that's something I wanted to stress there. So yes, I've mentioned a bunch of books here. Um, and if I had to prioritize that, I would say probably first priority would be to get the major scale expansion studies. And when you play the major scale, and that's only right now, only an ebook. Okay. I apologize for that, but it's just an ebook. We do plan to make a physical book out of it, but that takes a lot of work. So there's a long list of these books that we want to get up to date here. So that's what I would say first. The expansion studies, and then the the Trumpet Chops Express book. Forgetting the name of my own books, the Chops Express book, because it's got that first routine in it, that warm up routine. And in the warm up routine is the tonalization studies that I talk about here. And then I would probably recommend at that point the folk fill in the blank. I'm planning on making two other fill in the blank books. One is going to be hymns, and the other one is going to be um, Christmas carols. Those are projects that I want to work on. Anyway, I hope that answers the questions. Um, I'll tell you what I will do is I'll put in the description after this is all over. I'll put in the description a list of these books with the links to go to, not the links to go buy them, the links to read more about them on my website. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so Anthony says, a friend trumpet player of mine tells me to see if you're playing efficiently. Play third space C, then remove the mouthpiece and see where the buzz is on your tuner. It should be close. I've never heard that. I'm very suspicious. Okay, I've never heard that. I'll have to think about that for a while. Um, I'm very suspicious. All right, Anthony says remove the mouse. Right, that's how I understand what you're saying. Um, I think I understand why they're saying that. But the truth is, when you remove the mouthpiece, the standing wave changes, and now you're not having the same. So scientifically, I don't think that's sound. Okay, I don't think. But just as with everything else that we talk about that has anything to do with science, if it works, that's all the science you need. Okay, if it works and if it helps you, then go for it. David is here. Hello, David. Hello. He says hello from the UK. Welcome to the channel. Janelle says very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Cardo says, Eddie, would you recommend to exhaust all of your air capacity before we take a breath for the next phrase? Um, I I'm in favor of doing that on purpose sometimes to expand your, not capacity. I wouldn't call it capacity. Um, and I'm not saying I wouldn't call what you're saying capacity. I'm saying expanding your capacity. It's not for expanding. It's for expanding your, what do you call it? Expanding your. It's not capacity, because what happens with a lot of people is they won't push far enough. You start to get uncomfortable, um and you have to push beyond what's comfortable to get those long phrases. Now, as a matter of just playing music, I'm not a big fan of that. I think you should breathe naturally, as you would breathe if you were speaking sentences. So no, I don't believe in just going to the end of your capacity. Hello, just Ford again. If I could practice for 5 hours on my difficult days, then how long should I practice the medium and easy days? Um, Easy days should be, I guess, about an hour or two, and medium days should be 2.5, 3 hours. Of course, that's flexible. You want to do what works for you, and in this whole process, we're trying to find that sweet spot for you in terms of how much time and how high and all that stuff. But that's generally speaking what I would do when I have 5 hours. Um, I I would do 5 hours on, let's say, Tuesday. I would do 2.5 to 3 on Wednesday, not Wednesday, Monday, and then um 1.5 to 2 on Wednesday. Anthony says he's a nice old gentleman. He's just trying to help. Yeah, you know what? It's what I won't ever say is that I think something is wrong. I won't ever say that. I think when you when you talk about all this stuff, you know, it and not just talking but listening. When you hear what people have to say, it gives you a broader perspective of how all this stuff works. So it's not wrong to do that, or anything like that. Jeffrey Boyle, hello, nice to see you, Jeffrey. And Jess says thank you, so you're welcome. All right, so on to the next. All right. Oh, this is Janelle. Mr. Lewis, my name is Janelle. I subscribe to your YouTube channel and I am a fan of your videos. I especially like it when you play hymns and Christmas carols. Wonderful. I like it when people like that. All right. I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who wants to pick up the trumpet again. I played in middle school and 2 years in high school, but it's been 10 years since I last practiced. I think at this point, all I remember is the B flat major scale. Okay, so um, I'm a huge fan of what I call the expansion approach, expanding everything. So what you do know, you repeat what you do know. Let's say you already have the C major scale. Da, 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 dum. You do that 10 times. Then expand it going down. Um, and I can tell right now, just hearing what I just sang in my head, in my memory, I was singing, I think, concert pitch. Let me see if I'm right. I was singing the wrong note. All right, so do that 10 times if you know for sure you already have that. Then add the B natural on beneath it. And do that 10 times. Then add the A natural beneath it, add the G beneath it. And then, now this is sort of like my major scale expansion book. Major scale expansion studies. Now, the book is there for your convenience. When I first started teaching this stuff, there was no book. Um, with my students, it's very rare that they ever do it without the book. So, um, but you don't need the book. As I've said many times on this channel, I'm not here to just sell my stuff. Okay. Um, so yes, any kind of expansion. Now, I don't use the expansion concept just for scales. That's what people know because that's what I sell. If people were taking lessons with me, they would know that I use the expansion stuff for almost everything. How we learn music, how we do double tongue, all this stuff. I'm a huge fan of the expansion philosophy. So you take what you got and you add just a tiny bit more and you repeat that, and then you add a tiny bit more and you repeat that. That's so in a general way, what you asked was, do I have any suggestions? That's my suggestion for that, is approach it in an expansion manner. When you finish the C major scale, go on to a new scale. And also expanding the songs that you play. Let me tell you what I do with my students. When I have either a comeback player who has mostly forgotten most of it or um, a beginner, what we do in the lessons is first I do is to do the expansion with the scales like what we're talking about. And sometimes it's not a scale. And like I said, everybody is coming from a different background. So, ha- and that's why it's taken so long for me to publish those books, is because I need a system that you can say, okay, this note's not working for me. I'm going to go back to that part of the book or that part of the book so that this will work for me based on what notes come easiest to you. Now, so we start first with expanding so that they have the notes under their fingers. Then, because people are playing because they want to have fun, we also, as soon as they have those notes, we start doing songs right away. And by the way, when it comes to songs, we don't move on. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people do in when they try to learn. They think, okay, I've got Mary Had a Little Lamb down. Let's move on from Mary Had a Little Lamb. But I make my students come back to Mary Had a Little Lamb and come back again to it and come back again to it. And so now, how often we do Mary Had a Little Lamb gets farther and farther apart because we're learning more and more songs. But this idea of coming back to the song long after you learned it does something to us mentally. And if you think about it, that's another form of expansion. You're expanding your repertoire. And that's what the whole expansion concept is. You put your foot in the door. I used to call it the foot in the door approach, but the foot in the door approach is the expansion approach. You start with what you already have and you move it out to what you want. It's on the surface is a very simple concept. You start with what you have and you work towards what you want, but in tiny increments. And this 10 times thing is important. You do each thing that you're going to do, you do it 10 times because then it's going to become more second nature. Okay? All right. I hope that answers your question. All right, so this one is from James. Hi, Eddie. I recently landed a first chair position in a community orchestra. Woohoo! Congratulations, James. Um, Glad to say that due to the work I have been doing in Trumpet Chops Pro, my range and endurance are not an issue as my highest notes played are B flat above the staff. See? That's what we like. We like to hear from people that are making this work. All right. One of the pieces that we are playing is Tchaikovsky's Symphony Number 2. I feel I need to improve on my accuracy of attack above the staff. My accuracy is not a major problem, but it is just every once in a while I miss the location and crack. Usually the next harmonic higher, which you've been listening to my videos because you know that that matters to me. Which direction is the crack? Especially when there are no notes preceding or leading up to a note above the staff. So let's talk about how to improve accuracy in that context. That is most likely, in my opinion, based on my experience. When you tongue, and I don't remember Tchaikovsky 2, the melodies for that, that's the Little Russian. That's Tchaikovsky 2 is my favorite of all the Tchaikovskys, by the way. And I say that when I can't remember the melody. Um, but let me explain myself. We play the other Tchaikovskys so often, right? Not two, 4 and 5. We play those so often that how can you not remember what it sounds like? Two, we don't play so often. Two is kind of rare. So, and that's why I can't remember. I mean, I don't even have a recording of it. Uh, I've played it once, and I heard the Houston Symphony play it once. But it is by far my favorite of the Tchaikovsky symphonies. Um, anyway, so I don't remember. But you know what I used to have that problem on is Tchaikovsky's. Is it Tchaikovsky? Um, what's the one that he did? Capriccio Español. Isn't that Tchaikovsky? I think that's Tchaikovsky. And it's got that on C trumpet, the F triple tongue thing, and I'm splattering it all over the place. And you know what I mean? So it's got that something like that. I don't remember the exact figure. Um, and it was the result of playing that piece that made me figure out that when you're tonguing, the resistance goes up. So you have to compensate by lowering other resistance. Now that could be lowering your jaw a little bit. It can be opening the aperture a little bit. So that's what we would do to fix that problem is to um, compensate for the tonguing by lowering the resistance on in other areas. What are the other areas? This is something I got from the Bob Finley book. It's called Bob Finley on Trumpet. The other areas are one of them I don't talk about, so we won't talk about that. And then we have the two that we can't change while we're playing. That's the trumpet and the mouthpiece. So that leaves us with 4 others, and that would be the aperture, the tongue position, the jaw, and the teeth. Those are the areas of resistance. And when you tongue, you're creating higher resistance and the notes cracking up because of the greater resistance. Now, I might be wrong about this because I haven't heard you do it. We haven't, it's not like you've had a lesson or anything, but based on my experience, that sounds like what's happening. So you just have to, now, How do you practice that? You have to practice tonguing in that register. So, like, for example, one thing you could do temporarily is to tongue the tonalization studies until this concert comes up. In fact, if you wanted to, you could do, let's say you're doing the first one in the key of F. You could tongue double notes when you're up in the upper register, just as a way to prepare for this performance. And then after the performance is over, go back to slurring it all. Now remember that uh, accuracy comes from familiarity. And what happens, the reason you're cracking the note is because with that extra resistance, you're no longer familiar with that. That combination of musical aspects, you're no longer familiar. You have to do something to now become familiar. And basically, being familiar means living there for a while. I hope that makes sense. All right. Next is from Erwin. So Erwin has two messages, two emails, and this is the last one that we'll do from the advanced ones. Basically, I'm going to summarize this because it's kind of long. Basically, he wants to know what he can do. He's in 11th grade, and he wants to make All-State next year. What does he do now to prepare for the All-State music? And so let's summarize that. Now, let's say this first. I think if you want to make sure, I'll have to be careful how I word this. If you want a guaranteed spot in the All-State band, you can't do that. Now, the guaranteed spot thing, that's just theoretical. It's not possible to actually be guaranteed, right? But using that kind of language, right? If you want to be guaranteed a spot, you can't do that without 2 hours of practice 5 days a week. In my opinion, now you might say, well, I know somebody that practiced less. That's fine. Maybe they pulled it off. We're not talking about just kind of hopefully making All-State. We're talking about guaranteeing that you make All-State. If you want to be absolutely certain that you're doing everything you can do to get into All-State, then you need to be practicing 2 hours a day, and that starts now. That doesn't start when the music comes out. So that's the first thing I would say is get used to practicing that much. When you first start practicing that much, it's eh, overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And by the way, with my system, you don't practice it. The way I say it is you have to practice an average of 2 hours, 5 days a week. So 10 hours a week. But really, I also recommend that you follow my one range approach, which means that you don't practice the same amount every day. You practice more on some days than you do on other days. But we're trying to average 10 hours a week. Now, this might sound like it contradicts. A lot of you know that I don't believe in practicing all the time. I have a video where I talk about, I think I called it the only time it's okay to practice a lot. And in that video, I paint the scenario where you don't nobody needs to practice a lot. Nobody needs to practice a lot unless you have a deadline. That's the only time that you need to practice a lot is what that in this case I'm saying only time it's okay to practice a lot is if you have a deadline. You have X number of tasks that need to be done in a certain amount of time. And those tasks are not going to get done if you don't practice a certain number of hours a day. And Allstate is most definitely one of those deadlines. It takes so much effort in terms of what you're supposed to do to learn the music. That's why when I posted one year, I posted a recording of the Allstate jazz stuff, and it was only 3 days after the stuff came out. And one of the students on YouTube said, "Oh, I'm so glad I learned this before you posted it." 3 days. The longest they could have been practicing it was 3 days. You learn the etude in 3 days. Um, that's not how this stuff works. That's not how this stuff works. It takes a lot. If you want to make sure you're good, it's different. So remember, if you don't really care if you make Allstate or not, that's not what we're talking about, right? If you're like, "Oh, I'll put some effort into it and maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't." We're not talking about that. If that's what your goal is, then you don't have to do 2 hours a day for 5 days a week. We're talking about if you want to actually make sure that you make it. And I guess the way I need to say that is make sure that you're ready to make it. If you want that, then there's a lot of work that goes into that, and it takes time. So yes, that's the first thing I recommend is that you get enough practice time going now. And the second thing I would recommend is that you have a routine, a practice routine. If you do not have a practice routine, I recommend you go get one. Instead of using this time to experiment and create your own, you can use mine. I have Chops Express. But if you want to make Allstate, you should probably be using either the daily routines book or the what you call it, the Chops, the different Chops Pro book, Chops Player, Chops Apprentice. Okay. Um, but yes, that's the second thing is that you have some sort of rudimentary routine. It doesn't have to be mine. There are other routines out there. Most of them don't come in book form. So you have to get the routine and then find the books that have that have those exercises in. So a lot of people will share their routines online and they'll say page this from the Arvin, page this from the Clark, um, this page from the Schlossberg. Now you're gonna have to get all those books. And with mine, you will just have to get one book. So that's one good selling point for mine. So because my books actually make it easy. You open the page and play it. You don't have to have all that stuff going on. So that's the second thing I recommend is have an established routine that you do consistently. And then the next thing I would say is to practice etudes that are at the level that the All-State etudes are at. And that's not so hard, right? Because we know what the books are. There's the Arbin book, Brant book, um, the I forgot what it's called, the one that has a compilation of a whole bunch of etudes in it. I forget what that's called. But they alternate between 3 or 4 different books. If you were to, in theory, master the etudes in those books, you wouldn't have any trouble with any of the etudes when they come up. And here's the thing: you might just accidentally master the one that you're going to have on Allstate, so you could be a whole 3 months early, 3 months ahead. So that's the next thing I would recommend. Number 3 is to practice music that's already at that level. If you would like, once again, I don't just try to pitch my products on here, but I do have a book for exactly what you're talking about. It's called the Allstate Prep Book. And basically, what I did, the concept here, the first half is etudes, and the etudes that I did are short. So, like, here's one that has 3 etudes in one page on syncopation. And I made them short on purpose because when you're in this stage where you're trying to prepare for when the music comes out, you don't have a lot of time to master a full etude in the Clark book. If you want to cover all these different skills, then you have to either do small sections of the etudes, or you can go with this book that has just short etudes, like 8 measure, 16 measure etudes. That's the last of my advice for that, is be practicing music that's at the skill level that you're going to need to make Allstate. Okay, I hope that answers your question. All right. um Cardo says, Eddie, are you familiar with the Carmine Crusoe 6-note exercise? What do you think about it? I don't speak about Caruso because there are zealots that every time I talk about Caruso, people, um, it's like, when they talk about cancel culture, it's like cancel culture in trumpet world. It's, you can't believe how, like, religious these guys are. So what I will say is that I like the exercise. I assign it to the students that I think it's appropriate for. I will also say that um, the Caruso approach, the when I mentioned earlier the uh, um, the what's his name, Bob Finley book. When I mentioned Bob Finley, we know that Bob Finley was a student of Carmine Crusoe. So I'm a big fan of that. I just won't speak on that because those guys. Now, I'm not talking about Bob Finley being that way. There are other guys online that every time I talk about Crusoe, they get all bent out of shape. So that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to say I like it. I assign it when I think it's appropriate. What I won't tell you is that when I think it's appropriate, because that's when those guys get bent out of shape. I'm not teaching it right. Um, Hello, Gonya. Nice to see you again. Gonya says, I was in New Jersey All-State this year, and some of the better players told me that they actually didn't work on the music until a few weeks beforehand. Yeah, you know what? That all goes to what are the standards in your state. And I'm sorry to say that in the state of Texas, and it's not as bad as it used to be, and or maybe I should say not as good as it used to be, but it used to be that Allstate was life or death to the students, okay, that this mattered more to them than anything else in their lives. And if you made All State, you did something very amazing. And, um, you know, it just was not possible back then to just work on the music for a few days, a few weeks, and then make it. Now, I think you can do that for the all region level. We have region and then area and then state. And I think you can make region. If you're a good player, you can make region and um, not practice. But yes, I think that has to do with the overall standards of the students in that state. It's also, here's another thing, is the size of the state. That also makes a difference. Because when we have all state in Texas, you're talking about a population. Let's look at a comparison here. Okay, so Texas has 35 times more people than New Jersey. And that's going to um that's going to affect the competitiveness, right? So just one just one of your of our regions is the equivalent of the whole state of New Jersey. So that changes the picture just a little bit. Anthony says, Eddie, thank you for your help. Gotta go practice. See you next week. See you, Anthony. Cardo says, fair enough. Cardo was talking about the Crusoe stuff. Um, Gonya says, New Jersey Allstate is still competitive, but you're right that it's not as serious as Texas. I felt my audition went poorly and still got in. That's what I'm saying. And once again, the sheer numbers that we're talking about, because in Texas, you're auditioning essentially against literally thousands of students. That's why they have to have air, region, area, and state. That's why they have to do that, because there's too many to have an audition. We have, even at the area, I mean, even at the region level, you can have as many as 200 students trying out. Right. So Gonya says it's about 3.5 times smaller than Texas in terms of population. That's right. So so that's part of it, is that when you have, if when you have that many people auditioning, it is going to be more competitive. And also, because we have those tiers, and I don't know what they have in New Jersey, but because we have those tiers where you have to make region first and then area, you have this thing where only the most advanced students are even getting to audition for state. So yes, it is different. I'm not saying it's better. I know I said that earlier, but that's not what I mean. Not in that regard. I'm not saying it's better. All right. Do we have any more questions? I finished my written down ones. Any other questions this week? We're a little bit over. Gonya says New Jersey has region 1, 2, and 3, and then all state. I see. Anybody in region can do all state. Okay, that's close to what we have. By the way, I used to live in New Jersey too. So I said I lived in North Carolina. I also lived in New Jersey. I used to live in Fort Monmouth, and there was another place in New Jersey I used to live as well. Um, I can't remember the other place that it was, but yes, we lived in Fort Monmouth in this small 2-bedroom house right next to the train tracks. Um, We lived walking distance from the tank museum. There's a I don't know if it's still there, but there used to be in the 70s a tank museum, uh, where you could actually even climb on the tanks, and we used to go climb on the tanks. Janelle says, "Eddie, do you live stream every week, same day, same time?" No, it's not the same day, same time. I've been moving it around. We try to do every week, but sometimes I have gigs and students and can't do it. But we strive for this. Um, it's been lately on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. So, but yes, what I try to do is make sure that the notice goes up at least 24 hours in advance so that people know that it's coming up. And then I also post on social media. Sometimes I forget to do that. But if you add me as a friend on Facebook or LinkedIn, then you can get my notices that we're doing this. I post those right after I set the schedule. So, any other questions? Wow, we answered a lot of questions today. Good questions too. Lots of good questions. All right, so I guess that's it, unless something comes in. Um, Thanks guys for hanging out. It's always fun to do this, and I enjoy answering your questions and hanging out with you guys. Um, as usual, God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Okay, have a wonderful week, and see you later.